Hello fellow BCMers, I'm Jack and today I'm going to be talking about my DA submission for BCM241, which is called the re-review. So from the beginning of the semester I started to look at the films of David Lynch. That's where I based my digital artifact with my very first blog post. And when I submitted my first 3 blog posts and then I did my pitch, it was about the films of David Lynch. But when I looked back and reflected on my experience throughout the semester, I realized that I really wasn't sure what autoethnography was, which is evident in my second blog post, and I wasn't really finding an angle to talk about in terms of what autoethnography was in kind of an anthropology stance and why this is important or what people view film review as and how it's changing. And then in the second half of the semester for my 4th blog post, I decided to look at the work of Roger Ebert, and the title of my 4th blog post is a Roger Ebert epiphany, when I decided what my 3 epiphanies for this semester would be. And I decided to talk about Roger Ebert because in the basis for this project, a podcast called The Rewatchables, one of my favorite podcasts that I listen to pretty much every week, they talk about films in kind of like a casual like banter type style. It's a Ringer podcast with Bill Simmons and Chris Ryan, and each week they'll talk about a film, say The Godfather, and then they'll talk about and reference in the podcast Roger Ebert's take on that film, whether they agree with it, whether it's a popular take, or whether maybe he might have been kind of a different review of that movie, maybe an unpopular one at the time, or one that hasn't aged so well. So in terms of online persona, I kind of looked at the work of Chris Ryan and Bill Simmons for The Rewatchables. I looked at Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert do reviews on old school films like Godfather and Goodfellas and Taxi Driver and things like that. And then as I kind of got used to making installments of the re-review, when I started with Penguin Zero, the Moist Meter, when he reviewed Knives Out, each of them you'll find when you read them in order on my WordPress, the online persona and the manner in which and like the distinct voice is getting better and better as I do them. And the latest one that I did was a video, Chris Stuckman, that he did a review of 1917, where with the re-review I will have a look at how they've reviewed the film and rate that person on their review, and then actually look at the film itself. So it's like 2 birds with one stone in the one installment of my digital artifact, which is the re-review. And then in terms of the 3 epiphanies of this semester and what I've looked at in terms of the autoethnographic experience, I've looked at firstly the first epiphany, which is everyone's a critic, which is kind of like an old saying, like everyone's a critic. But in film review nowadays, you don't have to be a quote-unquote professional to look and influence a film. And one of the case studies was that latest Sonic movie where the public literally changed the animation of a movie. And I know that sounds a bit different, but in terms of social media, in terms of Netflix, all the streaming services, nowadays you don't have to be professional, and that's kind of how the industry is changing. And you can influence, you can talk about with your friends and family films on social media and impact those industry professionals. And so the second epiphany was that there's no right or wrong in terms of film review. So I've made at least 7 episodes of the re-review, and each one, some of them I love, like the Rewatchables, I'll listen, and they put me onto different filmmakers and directors because they always talk about it in an interesting manner with topics like, was it this their best movie they've ever made, or which performance was kind of the best supporting performance, things like that. They talk about things in a way that is interesting. But others I didn't agree with the way that they reviewed the film or their thoughts on the film. So at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong way to review a film. Some people are more successful and build a name for themselves, but there's not a right way to review a film. And lastly, it's just the third epiphany is that you just have to be ethical, be honest, and be interested. Because we've all seen videos online, myself included, of other people who talk about films or just review films and they just do not even sound enthused. So one of the biggest things in terms of film review is that you have to sound interested to get views and to put yourself out there and to talk about movies in such a way.